Good morning, everybody. Kate Johnson here from The Art of Cheese at Briargate Farm. And we are on day 4 of my 5 days on a Cheesemaker's Farm challenge, or session. I guess it's not really a challenge. Anyhow, here we are at my farm in Longmont, Colorado on a beautiful morning. I always like to start the day for you by letting you see the goats. Babies have been fed, mamas have not been milked yet. I decided to get up and do yoga instead of milking before our session today. So they will just wait until after our session. Usually I milk them sometime between 8 and 9 in the morning, so they're pretty flexible. And you can see everybody's back there just still kind of hanging out for the morning. And let's see, let me turn this around so you can see Mr. Seeger, the llama, in his watchful position here. Anyhow, it's a beautiful morning. There's Dusty, the barn cat. He wants to go in the milk house. He's my milking buddy. Anyhow, we are going to go on up and check on our curd. So let me tell you, if you're new to us this morning, what we've been up to. So let's see. The first day we bottle fed babies. The second day we milked the mamas. Yesterday we pasteurized some milk and started our Chevre. And this is my little classroom here, The Art of Cheese at Briargate Farm. This is our little dedicated teaching space in here, but it is running idle at the moment because we can't teach during the virus shutdown. So here we are in my classroom. First thing we always do before we do anything with cheese making is wash our hands, okay? We're getting good at washing our hands right now, aren't we? How many of you have washed your hands more in the last month than probably in the whole rest of your life combined? At any rate, with cheese making, we've always been big hand washers because one of the most important things when you're making cheese is really good hygiene. Everything has to be impeccably clean to avoid any kind of contamination. So we wash our hands a lot, and unfortunately we go through a lot of paper towels because it doesn't do you any good to wash your hands and then use a dirty dish towel. So you've got to use a clean one-use towel, as they call it. So you can always compost your paper towels if you feel guilty about how many paper towels you use, like I do. All right, so let us check in on what has been going on. So like I said, we started this yesterday, so I did pasteurize my goat milk. I milked the goats yesterday morning. I came in, I pasteurized the milk. I did that because the recommendation is that if we're making a fresh cheese, that we use pasteurized milk. Lots of people use raw milk. If you're really comfortable with your source and your practices, that's probably okay. But the recommendation is pasteurized milk for fresh cheeses, so that's what I did. Pasteurizing is pretty simple. We just heated it up to about 163 degrees, held it there for 30 seconds, and then cooled it back down quickly. Pretty simple. So then what I did last night was I got that pasteurized milk out and I heated it up to about room temperature, 72, 75 degrees or so. And I sprinkled a little bit of culture on top. So if you missed that session yesterday, you can go back and look at it. But we used mesophilic culture. Mesophilic means medium loving, and it loves a medium temperature. So cheeses that are made in that lower temperature range, usually 70 to about 100, 105 degrees, usually are going to use mesophilic culture as opposed to thermophilic culture. At any rate, we put our culture in, we let it sit for 2 hours, we left it alone, came back, added a drop of rennet, which was diluted in non-chlorinated water. Remember, rennet is the enzyme that coagulates the milk. And then I put the lid on and I went away and I did my evening stuff and then I went to bed and then I came back this morning and now you're gonna see what I see. Now, I gotta tell you, I have been making Chevre, probably about 12 years now. And I still, every time I do this, I come down in the morning and I gingerly lift off the lid and say, did it work? And yes, it worked. It always works, as long as you have non-ultra pasteurized milk, fresh cultures, and fresh rennet, and good hygiene. Another thing that can mess you up, and I've seen this happen before, is if you're hand washing your pots and you didn't rinse thoroughly, that residue that's just left in your pot, that little bit of soap that might be left, can interfere with this whole process. So we always should sanitize our pots anyhow. So even if you're hand washing, you should wash, rinse, and then sanitize your pot in some way. You can fill the pot with water and boil it, or you can use some kind of a sanitizing solution. Anyhow, we have lovely curd. See, this whole pot is all one big curd, and it's floating in whey. So this is just about perfect for what I like for my Chevre. I don't know, it could go another hour or two. Do you see how down here the curd is still almost attached to the pot, but over here on the sides it has let go? So usually there's a range of times that recipes will say to let this part go. And some of that range will determine whether your cheese is more acidic or less acidic, more mild or more sharp. And this is about how I like my curd to look. If I go a few more hours, this curd is going to continue to shrink and it'll crack a little bit. And that usually is a little over acidified for my taste. And probably a few hours ago, this curd was still stuck all the way around the side of the pot, and that's a little bit too mild for my taste. So now we're ready to scoop the curd. And you'll see over here, I have a little piece of butter muslin, which is just a very fine woven cheesecloth, sitting in a colander, which is sitting in a bowl. All right, and then back behind me, I have a big pot, which is what I'm going to use to hang the curd. And I'll show you that. Now, I'm doing this here on Facebook now, and then in 15 minutes I go over to Instagram. So I'm only going to scoop half of the curd right now, but I'll kind of show you what I'll be doing, and then I'm going to come back and scoop the rest of it. When we scoop the curd, using a skimmer like this, and you're using it kind of like a knife, is really optimal, where we want to just take thin layers like this, kind of a nice sharp cut of the layer, and then layer it into your cheesecloth. Now, the reason we want to do it this way is we don't want to shatter that butterfat molecule. Sometimes I'll hear people say, well, couldn't I just pour that curd into the cheesecloth? And yes, you could, but there's two things that will happen when you do that. One is it will be harder to drain, because when you do that, you are blocking the exit of the rest of the whey, right? You get all that curd in there, and then there's all this whey, and it just can't drain as evenly. The other thing is when you do that, you shatter the butterfat molecules, and they get sticky. And what will happen is they'll stick to your cheesecloth and make a big mess. And you'll also lose some of that precious butterfat into the whey. You'll lose it, it'll go out with the whey. So doing it this way will retain most of that butterfat, which you really want a lot of butterfat in your Chevre. That's what makes it creamy and delicious. And you'll also have cleanup much, much easier, which I'll be showing you, probably tomorrow morning when we take this all the way out. All right, so I'm gonna just turn this around again here. And I'll kind of show you here. Let me just put this down a little bit lower. What I do once I've scooped all the curd is I'll take opposite corners of the cheesecloth like this, and I'll just tie them together. And then come back and take the other side and tie those together. And now you'll see I have a nice bag. And in fact, these cheeses are often referred to as bag cheeses, okay? And what's gonna happen for our next period of time is it's just gonna drain. Because right now this Chevre is still full of whey in the curd. It's very moist. It's a little bit more like maybe Greek yogurt or something, and we want it to be much drier than that. So for this particular cheese, to dry it or drain it, all we do is hang it and let gravity and evaporation do its thing. With some other cheeses, we might cut the curd and stir the curd, we might heat the curd, press the curd, right? But with Chevre, all we're doing is letting it hang. And so then what I like to do is just hang this bag on the handle of a pot, all right? And then it can just drip right into the pot like that. Okay, now people rig up all kinds of different things to hang their curd. You could leave it just sitting in the colander if you wanted to, But what I find is if I do that, sometimes it doesn't drain as evenly because the colander itself is kind of blocking some of the evaporation. At any rate, this is what half of that bag looks like right now, right? I'm gonna come back and add the rest of that curd in my Instagram session in just a few minutes. But what's gonna happen now is I'm just gonna let this hang and drip for the next 12 to 24 hours. Okay, how long do you let it drip? Well, there's a few factors involved in deciding that. One is, how much curd did you put in here? I usually do a half a gallon in each of these little squares, and my butter muslin square is about 18 by 18 inches. And so I find a half a gallon of curd fits quite well in there. If I do a whole gallon of curd in one bag, it's gonna take longer to drain, okay? So for me, a half gallon in this size cheesecloth. And then the next factor to consider is how warm is it in your house, because you're gonna leave this draining at room temperature. Okay, you're not gonna refrigerate this. Cheese is made at room temperature. And we're gonna let it drain for it just sitting out on the counter, okay? So if it's a very, very warm day, things are going to evaporate a lot faster, right? If it's a very cold day, or you're doing this in the winter and it's chilly in the kitchen, it's gonna take longer. The third factor is, how humid is it? I live in Colorado. It's really dry here most of the time. But sometimes, like right now, we have a little more humidity. Sometimes it's cool and humid if it's been raining for a week and it's 50 degrees. That's unusual here, but it happens. And then all of this is gonna take longer. And then the fourth factor to determine how long you wanna let it drain is, what do you want your final texture to be? Do you want your Chevre to be really dry and compacted, or do you want it to be more creamy and spreadable? So if you want it more creamy and spreadable, don't let it hang quite as long, okay? But if you want it to be much drier and much more compact, you'll let it drain a little bit longer. Also, the fermentation that's happening is still continuing to happen. That doesn't stop when we pull it out of the pot. So letting it drain longer at room temperature will also make for a sharper flavor to your Chevre. So you see, it's a very, very simple cheese, but you can manipulate how you like your cheese when you make it yourself by kind of adjusting some of these factors. So I am going to come back in just a little bit and continue scooping curd into this. But what we'll be doing next is, tonight I'll come back and we'll check on the progress. We'll come back and we'll see how much this has drained, and maybe we'll even pull some of it out then, because that would be about 12 hours of draining. Not quite, because I'll be back here at 5:45, but then I'm going to probably let this drain overnight until tomorrow morning. And then tomorrow morning I'll have finished Chevre, and I'll show you all kinds of fun ways that I like to flavor and shape and make my Chevre unique. Because one of the most fun things about Chevre goat cheese is how many different varieties you can do. You can make it sweet, you can make it savory, you can shape it in a log, you can shape it in a disc, you can use it as a spread, you can use it as Chevre crumbles. There's just a lot of things that you can do with Chevre. And so it is one of my favorite cheeses to make. Often when people ask me what's my favorite cheese to make, I always say it depends how much time I have. When I am super busy, I make Chevre, because Chevre is one of those cheeses you don't have to do very much. The touch time is very minimal for you. It takes about 24 to 48 hours to make it, but you're most of the time doing other stuff. So it's a great go-to cheese if you're too busy. And in fact, I have a few minutes to tell you a funny story before I have to pop over to Instagram. The first time I ever made cheese, and this was probably 12 years ago, we had goats, we were milking the goats, and I thought, I gotta learn how to make cheese. I had never made cheese before. I got a book, I got some culture, and I didn't even have time to really read the recipe. I just knew what the ingredients were. And I thought, well, when I'm on vacation, my family has a little cottage up in Michigan, we don't do much, there's no TV, there's no distractions. I thought, then I will have time to make cheese. And so I carted my goat milk in a cooler all the way to Michigan, and then I made my first cheese there. And I just had to laugh, because when I actually read the recipe, and I'm like, okay, you heat the milk, add the culture, put the lid on, go away. I'm like, that's it? And then you come back, you add a drop of it, and you go away. I'm like, that's it? And then I thought, well, there must be more. And so the next morning I'm like, okay, now I really have to do stuff. No, you scoop the curd, you tie it, you go away. And I just had to laugh. I'm like, I could have done this even in my busy life at home. And so I would just encourage you, any of you who are thinking, oh, cheese making must be so complex, I'm too busy, I don't have time. Believe me, some of these cheeses are so easy, you can do them just going through your normal life. And if you don't have goats, I know some of you do. Nicole, I see you out there. Kathy, you've got goats. I don't think they have milk. But if you don't have goats, go to the grocery store. Go to Sprouts or Trader Joe's, buy Summerhill Goat Dairy Milk, or there is a local milk source in Colorado that is commercial, Mini Moos and Kids too. And they usually come to our farmer's market. Of course, we don't have farmer's markets going on right now. They used to be at Lucky's Market, I'm not sure. But anyhow, as long as you're not doing ultra pasteurized milk, you can make Chevre. You don't have to have goats. You can make it and you will be amazed how delicious it is. Okay, so that's all for this session. I'll be back here at 5:30. This is Facebook. Right now I'm going to hop over to my Instagram channel. It's The Art of Cheese Longmont if you want to hear more, and we'll visit with the goats at the end of that session. And then tomorrow morning we'll check in on our curd and we'll finish it. And tomorrow will be the last day, but I'll have some exciting announcements tomorrow, so tune in. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for watching. Please have a lovely and safe day. All right, bye-bye.